Imagine handing a software engineer the keys to the world's largest democracy and just saying, fix the bugs.
Oh, yeah.
Right. Like, no politicians, no messy backroom compromises, none of that grandstanding. Just pure, unadulterated math. You sit down, you open a massive spreadsheet, and you attempt to literally rewrite the operating system of a nation of over 1.4 billion people.
I mean, it really is the ultimate architectural thought experiment. You're taking this sprawling, historically complex, deeply human institution and just treating it like a system of inputs and outputs.
And that is exactly what we are looking at today. If you're listening to this, you know we love taking dense material and figuring out how the engine actually works. And today, well, we have a blueprint for an engine of staggering proportions.
Yeah, we really do.
We are diving into a very specific, highly detailed blog post. It was published on April 17th, 2026, by an author named Paramendra Kumarapagat, and it's titled Barackface, a delimitation proposal for India.
Which is such a fascinating document. And to really grasp this proposal, you kind of have to understand the mind of the architect behind it. The author notes right there in the source that he was Barack Obama's first full-time volunteer in New York City.
Right, which gives him this very specific grounding in, grassroots, on-the-ground political mobilization.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But then you look at the sidebars of his blog, his bibliography, and you see this massive pivot into high-level systems thinking. The guy is incredibly prolific.
Oh, totally. I mean, he's written books on artificial intelligence, like Agentic AI set to explode in 2026. He's writing about macro geopolitics and the $500 billion pivot.
Yeah.
He even writes sci-fi novels like The Country of Geniuses, and he outlines entirely new economic philosophies in works like Calquism.
Which perfectly frames what we are about to analyze in this deep dive. I mean, someone who spends their days analyzing artificial intelligence and global supply chains looks at a democratic system fundamentally differently than, say, a traditional constitutional lawyer would.
Right. A lawyer looks for precedent.
Exactly. But this author is looking for algorithmic efficiency. He's looking for a strict mathematical formula to perfectly balance population, wealth, gender, and time.
And because this blueprint proposes a complete, ground-up constitutional and political overhaul of India, I want to be incredibly clear with you, the listener, right at the top.
Yeah, this is important.
We aren't playing politics today. We are not here to pick a side or endorse this mathematical model or critique the underlying political realities of India.
No, not at all.
We are purely putting on our engineering hard hats. We're looking at the schematics the author provided to see how the gears turn, where the friction lies, and what happens when you try to solve a massive human society using a spreadsheet.
We're basically just testing the structural integrity of the math.
Exactly. So let's look at the foundation. The proposal is called the Revised Bicameral Reform Act. And the core premise is, honestly, brilliant in its pragmatism because it keeps the hardware exactly the same.
Right, the top line numbers.
Yeah. The author retains the current size of India's parliament. That's 545 seats in the lower house, the Lok Sabha, and 245 seats in the upper house, the Rajya Sabha. The numbers do not change by a single digit.
Which is a really crucial design choice. I mean, if you want to rewrite the rules of representation, the absolute worst thing you can do is simultaneously try to expand the physical size of the legislature.
Oh, yeah. It just creates chaos.
Right, because if you tell a country, hey, we are adding 300 new seats, the immediate reaction from every single state is this panic calculation of, wait, how many of the new seats do I get compared to my neighbor?
It triggers this endless zero-sum anxiety. It just becomes a real estate fight instead of a philosophy debate.
Precisely. By fixing the hardware at 545 and 245, you anchor the entire conversation.
Yeah.
The size of the pie is non-negotiable. The only thing we are debating is the fairness of the knife used to slice it. You limit the variables to force a cleaner solution.
Okay, so the hardware is fixed, but the software, how those seats are allocated and who sits in them, is completely demolished and rebuilt.
Yeah, it's a total rewrite.
So to understand this new code, we have to look at how it handles the most volatile metric in any democracy, which is pure population. Let's start with the lower house.
Okay.
545 seats, directly elected. The author uses 2024 Wikipedia and official UIDI population projections to map this out. That gives us an average constituency size of roughly 2.5 million people per seat.
Just conceptualizing that number is staggering,
Yeah.
In many European nations, 2.5 million people is the entire sovereign population of the country.
Yeah.
But in this model, it is a single data point, just one representative.
But you can't just take 1.4 billion people, divide by 545, and draw perfectly square lines on a map. You have states that are demographic behemoths and states with tiny populations nestled up in the mountains.
Right, the geography is wildly uneven.
So, the author hard-codes a safety net into the algorithm. Step 1, every single one of the 28 states gets a guaranteed minimum of 1 seat, period.
Which is a vital federal safeguard. If you run a pure, unfiltered proportional algorithm, a state like Sikkim or Mizoram might mathematically round down to 0.
They just disappear from the map.
They would be completely erased from the national conversation. So guaranteeing that baseline seat ensures geographical sovereignty is respected, regardless of the demographic math.
Okay, so we take 28 seats off the board for the 28 states. We are left with 517 seats to distribute based purely on population. And this is where the author deploys something called the largest remainder method, specifically the Hamilton method.
Yes, the Hamilton method.
And I need you to translate this because when I read largest remainder method, my brain instantly glazes over like I'm back in high school calculus.
It sounds intimidating, but let's strip away the academic jargon.
Yeah.
Let's look at it like slicing up a massive pizza for a group of people with wildly different appetites.
Okay, I like pizza.
You have 517 slices to hand out. You calculate exactly what percentage of the total population each state has, and you give them that exact percentage of the 517 slices.
But the math is never going to be perfectly clean, right? You're going to get weird decimal.
Never. Yeah. A state's population might dictate that they mathematically deserve exactly 14.7 slices of the pizza. But you can't send 0.7 of a representative to Parliament.
Not without causing a major incident.
Right. So under the Hamilton method, which is named after Alexander Hamilton, who actually designed this for the early U.S. Congress, by the way, you first give everyone their guaranteed whole slices. Our hypothetical state gets its 14 seats.
Okay.
You do this across the board, dropping all the fractions for a moment. But because you ignored all the 0.7s, 0.5s, and 0.3s, you're going to end up with a pile of leftover unassigned seats in the middle of the table.
The remainders.
Yes, the remainders. Now, how do you fairly distribute the leftovers? You simply rank all the states by their discarded fraction, from highest to lowest.
Oh, I see.
The state that was closest to needing another full seat, say, they had a remainder of 0.9, gets the first leftover seat.
Yeah.
The state with 0.8 gets the next one, and you just walk down the list until all 517 seats are claimed.
That's actually really elegant.
It is a highly transparent way to handle the rounding errors of democracy without inherently favoring the massive states or the tiny states.
Okay, so let's see what that pizza actually looks like when it's sliced up, because I really want to look at the regional clusters this creates. If you're listening, try to visualize the map of India as I read this. I'm going to give you the top tier first.
Let's hear it.
Okay, Uttar Pradesh gets 92 seats, Bihar gets 50, Maharashtra, 49, West Bengal, 39.
I have to stop you there just to highlight the sheer gravitational pull of the North and East in that math. Look at Uttar Pradesh at 92 and Bihar at 50. That is 142 seats concentrated in just 2 states.
About 545.
Exactly. Under a purely population-driven Hamilton-optimized model, the Gangetic Plain is the absolute, unshakable center of political power. If a political party sweeps just those 2 states, they are more than a quarter of the way to forming a national government.
The concentration of humanity is just wild. Now, let's drop down to the middle tier because the Hamilton method creates some really interesting mathematical ties here. Listen to this. Madhya Pradesh sits at 34. Rajasthan, 32, Tamil Nadu, 30, Gujarat, 28, Karnataka, 27, Andhra Pradesh, 21, Odisha, 19, Jharkhand, 16, and then you have Assam, Kerala, and Telangana all tie at exactly 15 seats.
Look at that exact 3-way tie at the end. Assam in the northeast, Kerala in the deep south, and Telangana in the south-central region. 3 states with vastly different cultures, different economies, and completely different geographic footprints, all perfectly equalized at 15 seats apiece, based purely on their 2024 population projections.
Yeah, the algorithm strips away all their historical context and just weighs the human capital.
That's the cold reality of a math.
And finally, we hit the smaller states, the ones protected by that baseline rule and the rounding method. You have places like Uttarakhand with 5, Himachal Pradesh with 4, Tripura 3, Goa, Manipur, Meghalaya, and Nagaland all sit at 2, and then the single-seat states, Mizoram and Sikkim.
And here is where we find a really fascinating quirk in the math. The author's text mentions that small states have modestly larger per-seat populations, referring to the proportional distribution. But when you factor in the hard rule of that 1-seat minimum, the reality often flips. For a state like Sikkim, Their single guaranteed representative might be speaking for well under 1 million people. Meanwhile, a representative in Uttar Pradesh is speaking for 2.5 million.
Wow. So the single voter in Sikkim actually holds mathematically more weight than the single voter in Uttar Pradesh.
Substantially more. It is the baked-in cost of maintaining a federal union. You have to distort the math slightly at the absolute edges to keep the smallest players from just, walking away from the table entirely.
Right, right. But the algorithm isn't just concerned with which state gets the seats. It also dictates who is legally allowed to sit in them.
Yes.
And this brings us to a hard constraint the author programs into the lower house, which is gender justice. The proposal mandates that 1/3 of all constituencies, which comes out to about 182 seats out of the 545, are reserved exclusively for women candidates.
And the critical mechanism here, the really systemic part, is that these 182 reserved constituencies rotate every single election cycle.
See, let me push back on this, because from a purely systemic view, that introduces massive friction.
How so?
Well, if I'm a politician and I spend 10 years building a grassroots coalition, right? I'm fixing roads, I'm kissing babies, and solidifying my district. And suddenly, the 15-year algorithm flags my specific district as reserved for women this cycle. I am mathematically locked out of my own seat.
Yep.
My career is completely frozen. Doesn't that destroy the concept of long-term local representation and dynasty building?
It absolutely destroys dynasty building. And from the author's engineered perspective, that is a feature, not a bug.
Interesting.
Yeah, if a seat rotates out from under an entrenched male politician, he really only has two choices. He can retire, or he can move his political machine to a neighboring unreserved district, which forces him to compete in entirely new territory.
Oh, so it breaks up those local fiefdoms?
Exactly. But think about the pipeline effect, too.
Yeah.
By hard-coding a rotating 33% reservation, you aren't just saying, well, we hope more women run. You are mathematically forcing the political parties to recruit, fund, and train thousands of female candidates across the country.
Because they literally have to fill those 182 slots.
Yes. Over a 15-year cycle, virtually every single voter in the country will have participated in an election where their only options were female candidates. It rewrites the behavioral norms of the electorate from the ground up.
It's forced evolution via spreadsheet?
Yeah, that's exactly what it is.
Okay, so that is the lower house. 545 seats, dominated by pure population, heavily weighted toward the north, with mathematical safety nets for small states and a hard-coded gender rotation. It makes sense. It's a louder, more mathematically precise version of what a democracy typically looks like.
But now we have to talk about the upper house, the Rajya Sabha.
Yeah. This is where the blueprint goes completely off the rails of traditional political science.
You are not kidding.
If you are listening to this and doing the math in your head, get ready to recalibrate everything. The upper house has 245 directly elected seats, but they're not allocated just by population.
No, they are not.
The author introduces a composite index. This index measures population, yes, but it also measures GDP, specifically gross state domestic product, or GSDP.
To understand how radical this is, look at the global standard. Usually an upper house in a federation does one of two things. It either treats every state completely equally, like the U.S. Senate, where a massive economy like California and a tiny economy like Wyoming both get exactly 2 seats.
Right.
Or it acts as a slightly refined, indirectly elected reflection of population. But to explicitly hard-code economic output to tie a state's democratic voting power directly to its wealth generation is a profound philosophical leap.
I'm going to read the exact formula the author provides in the source because it's so specific. Score equals 0.5 times the state's population divided by the total population, plus 0.5 times the state's GSDP divided by the total GSDP. And he pulls this from the 2024-25 GSDP at current prices via MOS SPI, which is the Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation.
So we were talking about a strict 50-50 split. Half of a state's influence in the upper house is determined by the number of human beings living there. The other half is determined entirely by how much money that state pumps into the national economy relative to everyone else.
Hold on, I have to stop here. As a listener, my alarm bells are deafening right now.
Oh, I'm sure.
Aren't we just letting wealthy states buy a veto? Like, by giving economic output exactly equal weight to human population, aren't we fundamentally destroying the bedrock democratic ideal of one person, one vote? You are literally saying that a dollar generated has the exact same legislative value as a human breathing.
That is the exact blazing hot tension at the center of this proposal. It really is. But if we pull back and look at the macro geopolitics of India, you can see why an author obsessed with global trade and systems design would propose this, what he calls a federal quality check.
Okay, unpack that for me.
India is facing a massive historic demographic and economic divergence.
The North-South divide.
Exactly. The northern and eastern states, Uttar Pradesh, Bihar, have rapidly growing populations but struggle with lower per capita economic output. The southern and western states, Maharashtra, Tamil Nadu, Karnataka, have largely stabilized their populations, but they are absolute economic juggernauts. They are the engines driving the national treasury.
So under the lower house rules we just discussed, pure population, the North completely dominates. UP and Bihar alone have 142 seats.
Right. And the wealthy southern and western states look at that and say, we are fueling the nation's growth, but mathematically we are becoming politically irrelevant. That builds immense resentment.
I can see that.
So the author is trying to design an algorithmic pressure valve. By making the upper house a 50-50 composite of wealth and people, he is intentionally giving the economic powerhouses a counterbalance against the sheer demographic weight of the North.
The numbers on this are mind-blowing. Let's compare the new upper house allocations to the lower house allocations. We're using the same Hamilton method, the same one-seat minimum, but applying it to this new 50-50 GSDP formula for 245 total seats. Listen to how the map changes.
It's drastic.
Top tier of the upper house. Uttar Pradesh gets 29 seats, Maharashtra gets 26.
That right there is the entire philosophy of the proposal visualized. Think about it. In the population-only lower house, Uttar Pradesh had 92 seats and Maharashtra had 49. UP had nearly double the power.
Yeah.
But here in the upper house, because Maharashtra drives such immense economic output, it skyrockets to 26 seats. It almost entirely closes the gap with Uttar Pradesh, which plummets from 92 down to 29.
It's an earth-shattering shift in gravity. Let's keep reading down the list. Tamil Nadu gets 18, Gujarat gets 16, Karnataka gets 16, Bihar drops to 50, and West Bengal sits at 15.
Look at Tamil Nadu and Bihar. Under pure population, Bihar had 50 and Tamil Nadu had 30. In this wealth-weighted system, Tamil Nadu leaps ahead. It gets 18 seats while Bihar drops to 15. The wealth variable has completely inverted their power dynamic.
And Gujarat and Karnataka tie at 16, both beating out West Bengal at 15. Even though West Bengal has tens of millions more people, the math is just brutal.
It's ruthless.
Let me read the rest of this 245-seat chamber. Rajasthan gets 14, Madhya Pradesh 13, Andhra Pradesh 11, Telangana 10, Haryana, Kerala, and Odisha all get 8, Assam, Jharkhand, and Punjab get 6, Chhattisgarh 5, Uttarakhand 3, Goa, Himachal Pradesh, and Tripura get 2.
And then the singles.
Yeah, and the single seats. Arunachal Pradesh, Manipur, Meghalaya, Mizoram, Nagaland, and Sikkim.
It's worth pointing out how incredibly meticulous the author is with the data here. He explicitly notes that for the 2024-25 data, Tripura's GSDP was approximated consistently with peer small states.
Oh, why is that important?
Well, it shows you the vulnerability of an algorithmic democracy. If the Ministry of Statistics is late publishing a single state's GDP data, or the data is missing, the entire national allocation formula breaks. The system requires constant, flawless data inputs to function.
Wow. And just like the lower house, there is a strict 1/3 reservation for women, meaning roughly 82 of these 245 seats are reserved, rotating every cycle.
Exact.
So if we synthesize this massive bicameral system, the author has designed a legislative meat grinder that forces a negotiation between sheer humanity and raw economic output. If you want to pass a law, you have to satisfy the lower house, which represents the will of the billions, and you have to survive the upper house, which acts as a heavily weighted veto gate for the states actually funding the government.
It is the ultimate systemic check and balance. It forces populism to negotiate with capital.
Which perfectly transitions us to how the system actually runs the country day to day. The author doesn't just redesign the parliament, he completely reimagines the executive cabinet, the prime minister and the cabinet ministers.
And here we see the system pivot into what I would call technocratic flexibility.
Because according to the source material, the prime minister and the cabinet ministers do not need to be sitting members of parliament at all.
Think about how radical that is for a Westminster parliamentary system. Currently, if you want to be the Minister of Finance, you have to be elected by voters.
Right.
If the prime minister taps an outsider, that person usually has a strict window, say 6 months, to win a frantic by-election somewhere in the country, just to legally keep their job. This proposal severs that requirement entirely.
It's like separating the CEO's operational hiring from the board of directors' oversight. The prime minister is the CEO. They want to hire a cabinet at the parliament. The operational managers, they shouldn't have to hire from the board of directors of the parliament.
I love that analogy. Let's say the country is facing a massive crisis in its artificial intelligence infrastructure. or catastrophic failure in global supply chains. Under the current system, the prime minister has to find a politician who is charismatic enough to win a grueling geographic election, ruthless enough to survive party politics, and who also happens to be a world-class, globally recognized expert in AI or logistics.
That Venn diagram is just two separate circles.
Exactly. Under this new blueprint, the prime minister bypasses the politicians entirely. They can call up the CEO of a major tech firm or a leading researcher at a top university and appoint them directly as the Minister of Artificial Intelligence.
Oh, wow.
That person doesn't have to run rallies. They don't have to kiss babies. They just execute their expertise.
But they don't operate in a vacuum. There are massive checks and balances built into this. First, the lower house, the 545-seat population house, retains overall confidence in the government. If they vote no confidence, the whole thing collapses.
Right, that's the democratic anchor.
But the second check is the fascinating one. Every single minister, including the prime minister if they aren't an MP, must receive a majority confirmation vote in the upper house.
The upper house holds the keys to the cabinet.
And this is where I want to test the friction of the system. Let's think about this. The upper house is heavily weighted by GSDP. Maharashtra has 26 seats, Tamil Nadu 18, Gujarat 16. If this specific chamber holds the confirmation power over every single minister, what kind of cabinet does this system inherently favor?
It's a brilliant question, and it reveals the underlying bias of the algorithm. Because the upper house is 50% weighted by wealth, the confirmation process will overwhelmingly favor ministers who prioritize economic growth, free trade, deregulation, and fiscal stability.
That makes total sense.
Imagine a highly populous politician from a heavily populated northern state is nominated for Minister of Agriculture. He wants to implement massive farming subsidies that will drain the national treasury. The lower house might love him.
Oh, they cheer him on.
But when he goes to the upper house for confirmation, the representatives from the wealthy, industrialized states are going to look at his policies, realize they will be footing the bill, and veto him.
So the lower house can say, we trust this government broadly, but the upper house can laser target specific individuals and say, we do not trust this specific person to run the Ministry of Finance.
The author explicitly calls this the federal economic quality check on individuals. It is an engineered barrier to prevent pure populist demagoguery from taking control of the actual levers of the state economy.
It forces a compromise. The populists get the broad mandate in the lower house, but they have to appoint technocrats who satisfy the economic powerhouses in the upper house. It's a fascinating, deeply cynical, and highly pragmatic design.
And yet we haven't even touched on the most logistically mind-bending part of the entire document. We've redesigned the math of representation, we've redesigned the hiring of the executive, but to make this entire machine work, the author has to conquer the one variable that creates the most chaos in any democracy.
Time.
Time.
We are talking about the synchronized national election calendar. If you've ever followed Indian politics, you know it is a system in perpetual motion. With national elections, 28 separate state assembly elections, and thousands upon thousands of local, municipal, and panchayat elections, the country is constantly voting.
Which means the country is constantly campaigning.
Right. And when an election is announced, the model code of conduct kicks in. This is a rule that essentially paralyzes the government. To prevent bribery or unfair advantages, the ruling party cannot announce new projects, lay foundation stones, or roll out new welfare schemes while the code is active.
Yeah, it freezes everything.
Because elections are always happening somewhere, the national and state governments are constantly freezing their operations. It's governance by stutter step.
The author looks at this and sees terminal inefficiency. His solution is absolute, brutal synchronization. He proposes completely eliminating off-cycle elections. 0 exceptions.
He establishes exactly 2 fixed national election days every 5 years. They're spaced exactly 2.5 years apart. And he elevates these to sacred status. Both days are strict national holidays. Banks, offices, schools, everything shuts down nationwide to maximize voter turnout and ensure the logistical machinery can operate without friction.
To manage the sheer scale of this, the author introduces a cohort system. Think of it like batch processing in computer science. You don't run tasks constantly, you group them together and run them all at once to save CPU usage.
Okay.
He takes the 28 states and divides them into 2 groups, Group A and Group B, 13 states in each.
And the source notes that these groups aren't just drawn randomly out of a hat. They are balanced by population, GSDP, and geography. So Group A might be a mix of massive northern states like UP and Bihar alongside central states like Madhya Pradesh.
Right.
Group B would balance that out with western and southern states like Maharashtra, Tamil Nadu, and West Bengal. They're two perfectly balanced halves of the country.
Now, let's look at the actual 15-year sample timeline the author maps out. This is where you see the algorithm of time in action. He starts the clock in the year 2030, assuming this is the first synchronized cycle after the current political terms expire.
I am going to read these dates because it really does feel like reading a train timetable. First up, Election Day 1, which we'll call Type A. The author fixes this on the second Sunday of April, and he's specific about why April offers pleasant pre-monsoon weather across most of the subcontinent, which historically drives high voter turnout.
It's all calculated.
So let's look at April 13, 2030. What exactly is happening on this day?
It is arguably the single largest logistical event in human history. On April 13, 2030, voters go to the polls to elect the full lower house, all 545 seats. They elect the full upper house, all 245 seats.
Wow.
But that's just the national level. Simultaneously, voters in the 14 states of Group A are electing their full state assemblies. Simultaneously with that, they are electing all of their local bodies, the mayors, the municipal councils, the village panchayats.
So if I am a voter living in a Group A state like Uttar Pradesh, I walk into the voting booth on April 13th, and I am casting ballots for my local village leader, my state representative, and my national members of parliament, all in one shot.
Everything, all at once. And then the system goes dark.
For exactly 2.5 years, there is not a single election held anywhere in the country. No campaigns, no model code of conduct, no rallies blocking the streets.
The politicians are forced to actually administrate.
Until we hit Election Day 2, Type B. The author fixes this on the second Sunday of October, exactly 2.5 years later. Why October? It's post-monsoon, the harvest is largely managed, and it's convenient nationwide. So we jump from April 2030 to October 10th, 2032. What happens now?
This is the smaller, localized batch process. The national parliament was elected for a 5-year term, so they're only halfway through. They do not vote. On October 10, 2032, only the voters in the 14 states of Group B go to the polls. They elect their state assemblies, and they elect their local bodies.
And then the system goes dark again, another 2.5 years of silence, until we hit the next Election Day 1, Type A, April 8, 2035. The 5-year clock for the national parliament and the Group A states has run out. So the massive machine spins up again. Full Lok Sabha, full upper house, Group A states, Group A locals.
And this cycle repeats like a metronome into infinity. October 11th, 2037, Group B states and locals. April 8th, 2040, full parliament, Group A states. October 13, 2042, Group B states. It is a perfectly engineered, unyielding loop.
But hold on, human politics is not a perfectly engineered loop.
Yeah.
Coalitions collapse, scandals happen. A prime minister loses a vote of confidence halfway through their term. If a government falls in the system, do we break the calendar to hold an emergency election? What happens when reality breaks the spreadsheet?
This is perhaps the most ruthless aspect of the entire proposal. No, you do not break the calendar.
Sir?
The algorithm does not care about your political crisis. If a state government in Group A collapses after only 3 years in power, they do not hold an emergency election. The state might be placed under emergency president's rule, or a temporary caretaker government might be patched together, but the citizens do not get to vote again until the next scheduled national election day for their group.
So they just sit in democratic stasis.
Yes, but it gets even stricter. Let's say they wait the 2 years, they finally vote on the scheduled day, and a new government is formed. To keep the 15-year master calendar perfectly synchronized, that newly elected government does not get a full 5-year term. They are essentially serving a penalty. They only get to serve the remainder of the original term.
So if they fell after 3 years, the new guys only get to rule for 2 years before they are forced back to the polls on the master schedule.
Exactly. The author notes that this concept builds on the accepted Coven Committee framework, a real-world committee in India that recently studied simultaneous elections. But this proposal takes it to an extreme, uncompromising level by extending it down to local municipalities and enforcing exactly 2 days a decade.
I mean, let's look at the implications of this. On the positive side, the efficiency is off the charts. Organizing an election in India costs billions of dollars. It requires moving millions of electronic voting machines and deploying paramilitary security forces across deserts, mountains, and dense megacities. By batch processing this into 2 days every 5 years, the financial savings are astronomical.
And as we discussed, the governance savings are equally huge. The Model Code of Conduct only paralyzes the country twice a decade. Politicians have a guaranteed, uninterrupted 2.5-year block to pass complex legislation, build long-term infrastructure, and actually execute their vision without constantly looking over their shoulder at a state election next month. It forces a long-term economic view.
But the friction here is terrifying. If you vote in a government, and 1 year later they turn out to be deeply corrupt, or they completely mismanage a massive crisis like a pandemic, you have absolutely no democratic release valve.
None.
You cannot recall them. You cannot force an early election. You just have to sit there and suffer for 4 more years until the master calendar gives you permission to vote again. The rigidity ensures absolute efficiency, but it completely sacrifices democratic responsiveness.
It treats democratic feedback as a system vulnerability that needs to be throttled.
Which really brings us to the big picture here. We've spent this entire deep dive unpacking the variables of this proposal. The author, Paramendra Kumar Bhagat, has looked at the staggering complexity of a billion-plus person democracy and decided that the current organic, messy system is unsustainable. He believes it will eventually buckle under its own weight.
So he engineered a solution. He applied the Hamilton method to ruthlessly solve population disparities and fractional rounding errors. He created a 50-50 composite score of GSDP and population to mathematically force a balance of power between the demographic dominance of the North and the economic wealth of the South.
Yeah.
He separated the executive from the legislative to inject pure technocratic efficiency into the cabinet. And he designed an unyielding, synchronized calendar to mathematically eliminate the chaos of perpetual campaigning.
It is a profound thought experiment because it proves how incredibly sensitive a democracy is to the math underneath it. If you change the weighting of GDP from 0% to 50% in the upper house, you don't just change a formula, you completely alter the destiny of the nation. Tamil Nadu and Maharashtra suddenly gain veto power over the massive populations of Uttar Pradesh and Bihar.
Right.
If you enforce a strict 15-year calendar, you change the daily behavioral psychology of every single politician in the country.
The arithmetic of democracy is never neutral. Every formula has a bias. Every algorithm has a winner and a loser.
Which leaves us with a final, very thorny concept to chew on. If you're listening to this, you've just walked through the absolute pinnacle of engineered governance. This blueprint tries to achieve perfection. But if we actually do this, if we engineer a democracy to mathematically, flawlessly balance wealth, population, gender, and time, at what point does it stop feeling like a loud, organic, beautifully messy human society? Does it just become a cold, unfeeling algorithm?
Is the goal of a democracy to run on time, or is the messiness, the constant chaotic feedback, actually the entire point of the system?
That's a question you can't solve on a spreadsheet. Thanks for taking the deep dive with us. Keep questioning the math, and we'll see you next time.